If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. John Stuart Mill. All right, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, I'm back. Did you guys miss me? No? Okay. Didn't think so, but that's okay. We'll continue working to get to that point where when I'm gone, you guys actually miss me. We have a running joke in this household when my wife or I leave. We say, I don't know, I can't remember how it started. It was years ago. But the running joke is we're not allowed to miss each other until it's been like 5 days. I think it started a long time ago when we were dating. We both had jobs that had us traveling a lot. And so we were constantly in and out of town. And, you know, we might be out of town for a day or two. We might be out of town for like a week or two. And so I think we just kind of came up with this, like, all right, so we don't have to worry about whether or not somebody's missing the other person. We'll just go with, you don't miss each other. We can't miss each other until it's been 5 days. All right. Speaking of missing people, you guys are going to maybe not be so happy with me, but I got to do what I've got to do. Next week, I'm going to take off from live streaming, but don't get angry. I made this decision kind of like somewhere between last night and this morning because here's what's going on. I am behind on a bunch of stuff. I don't really have time to make some of the improvements and changes that I would like to make, especially now that I've kind of bailed on the Rumble Creator Program. So I'm going to take next week off from streaming. Okay? From streaming. So what I'm going to do is I will publish some of my some of the videos that I had previously only done in the Rumble Creator Program as private videos. I will publish those publicly. I will just drop them Monday through Friday, and and maybe I'll even make a pre-recorded video. But I'm doing this so I can get caught up because I'm behind on quite a few things that I want to do. For instance, if you watch the show live on X or YouTube or Rumble Studio, or Facebook, then it may not occur to you. But I'm actually behind a good handful of episodes for my for the podcast folks, for those listening on Spotify, iTunes, and so on and so forth. I am behind on getting those. You know what? Converting these streams into audio only, that if you get behind, it's kind of like getting behind on your rent. Like it's hard to catch up. So this is my effort to play catch up. And I figured I'm going to be taking some time off work, in light of the upcoming the holiday. And so I figured, this would be a good time to do it. Just like do it all. Take some time off work so I don't have to worry about work. I don't have to worry about trying to, get here and get prepared and be ready, by 7:30 in the morning. This will give me a chance to kind of reset some things, especially with the change that I made. You probably noticed at the very beginning, it's kind of disordered. Like there's like this screen and then like it just isn't fluid. Doesn't flow very well. So we're going to resolve all of that, and all of that can be done. I just got to be able to dedicate some time to sitting and doing so. So that's what I've got going on. All right. Today, we're going to talk flag burning. Man, I tell you what, the internet's been ablaze, right? Like people are just fired up about it. And it's funny because you've got a lot of the conservatives, the right wingers, if you will. I'm going to call them right wingers. I think that's probably a better term. A lot of the people on the right, they seem to be split between happy and kind of like, yeah, flag burning should be illegal. How dare you burn my flag, you dirty commie, hippie, scruffy-haired loser that wants to smoke marijuana, which also makes you a loser. Like, and you're an immigrant, and I hate you, right? Like, they're very angry. And then you have, like, this other portion of the right. They're kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, bro. Kind of sounds more like the weed guy, right? But they're like, yo, wait a minute, man. That's not what we didn't vote for you for that. And then there's people like me that are like, well, you kind of did. Because not once but twice, Trump said he was going to be looking to punish people a year in jail for flag burning. And he did it with live audiences. And you can go back and you can listen to the audio. There's at least two. There might be more, but there's at least two where he's got a crowd and they're cheering. I don't know what you expected if you voted for him. And the funny part about this is that people will say, well, I didn't vote for him for that. They only want to be held accountable for all the good things he does, but none of the bad stuff, particularly in light of the stuff that we can go back and say, he said he was going to do this. And so they might well go, he says a lot of things. Okay, but those same people were also the ones when I was doubting Trump and saying, I don't know if he's going to do this. I don't know. They're like, he's different now. He's got, a different team with him. He's learned his lesson. Okay, so make up your mind. Did he learn his lesson and now he's delivering, campaign promises that he intends to follow through with? Or did he not learn his lesson and we can't trust which campaign promises he actually is going to try and follow through with? Like, you can't have it both ways there, right-wingers. And I'm kind of talking more to the libertarian crowd because they're the ones that got on their high horses, and they were the ones that told me, no, dude, you got to vote for this guy. It's either him or Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is so much worse, and virtually everything that she was going to be so much worse on, we're seeing Trump do now, price controls, so on and so forth. So that's interesting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, you put your faith in a guy that you swore up and down had changed, had recruited new people around him, was going to beat the deep state, and that we could trust what he said on the campaign trail. And now you want to turn around and be like, act as if you had no clue that he was going to wreck our First Amendment in the way that he's trying to do right now. No, you have to own this. Grow up, put your big boy pants on, and own it like a man or a woman. You made a choice. Basically, you made your bed. Now lie in it. And I tried to tell you, he's a lame duck. If he does follow through with this stuff, you have no way of controlling him. Right? And this was me talking to the libertarians. I said, you have no power to control him. You want to talk kingmaker and all this other gibberish? You had no power to make sure that he only did the things that you wanted and didn't do the things that you didn't want. So, no, you own this. But let's get back to the flag burning. Okay? I just kind of wanted to throw that in there because I think it's important, because there's a lot of people out there that kind of are tripping over themselves to act as if like, well, I was against this. Well, you should have been against it, like for real against it then. Right? You can't just come back and be like, well, that's not what I voted. No, you voted for it. If we lose some bit of our First Amendment, it's your fault. Literally, it's your fault. You voted for the man. And then you paraded around the first month or so. You're like, look at all this winning that we're doing. I'm sorry. I said I was going to get on to flag burning, didn't I? Let's get on to flag burning. But I think I've made my point. All right, so here's the White House executive order. We'll go through it quickly, and then we're going to dive into some of these arguments, and I'm going to tell you some stuff that you may not know. Hopefully, you don't know it, but we'll see. All right, so here's his executive order prosecuting burning of the American flag. All right, it is Section 1, purpose. I like purposes. Like, what are we doing this for? Doesn't mean I agree, but I can appreciate that he's laying out why he's doing this. Okay, our great American flag is the most sacred and cherished symbol of the United States of America and of American freedom, identity, and strength. Yeah, I don't really disagree with that. I'm okay with that. I think it is a sacred and cherished symbol. Now, how we handle it, that's another matter. But I think it is a pretty cherished symbol. Like when people think of America, when they think of freedom, they generally have a U.S. American flag in their hand. They might have, the Statue of Liberty. But between those two, I would say more often than not, you're going to find the flag. He goes on and it says, over nearly 2.5 centuries, many thousands of American patriots have fought, bled, and died to keep the stars and stripes waving proudly. Sure, I'll go with that, right? Like now, some of my peers might argue and say, well, we weren't really fighting in many wars, to keep the flag proudly waving. I get that. Many soldiers, that was their understanding of what they were doing. I am fighting for freedom. Even if we can go back and argue and say, what freedom is it that you were fighting for? What were you on the verge of losing? Those are nitpicking ideas. I totally get it. But from a soldier's point of view, why they were there, if you asked them, if you said, why are you fighting in this war? For freedom, for America, right? Like that was their intention. So I'm okay with this sentence. The American flag is a special symbol in our national life that should unite and represent all Americans of every background and walk of life. Okay, I'm okay with this because he says should. Like a lot of things should be the case, right? You should get plenty of sleep. You should eat well. You should exercise. You should not drink too much, right? Like there's lots of shoulds in the world. And I'm okay with, a representative, an elected person saying should. A lot of things should be the case. That doesn't mean they are, but they should be. All right? Desecrating it is uniquely offensive and provocative. Depends on who you're talking to. It is a statement of contempt, hostility, and violence against our nation. Okay, so this is where we get our first tire screech stop, right? Stop right there, okay? It is not violence against our nation, okay? Violence against our nation would be like, I don't know, an army crossing over the border attacking us. What happened on October 7th in Israel? That was violence against a nation. Right? People leaped over a border. They flew over a border. They attacked and killed a bunch of people, took some hostage. That was violence. We should not conflate burning a flag and actual violence, harm to people. Okay? So there's my first disagreement. It is a statement of, the clearest possible expression of opposition to the political union that preserves our rights, liberty, and security. Maybe. So what it's a statement of depends on who's burning it and why they're burning it. In the Vietnam War, when people burned the American flag, they were primarily burning it in opposition to the Vietnam War. When you see images of, say, a Hispanic person, maybe an illegal immigrant who's burning the flag, they may be protesting against immigration laws. But I don't think you're going to find too many people that are really burning the flag to say, I hate this whole country and absolutely everything that it stands for. That's not usually the case. You might find there's, we want to be careful with absolutes. It's not always the case. It's weird. Like, we want to be careful with absolutes. It's not always the case, kind of saying something absolutely. But I can see a time where there would be some people who might feel that way. But from my observation, most people are focusing in on one reason or another. Burning this representation of America may incite violence and riot. Now, this is very rich, okay? Because I don't believe that words are violence, and I do believe that burning the flag is effectively the same thing as words. It's speech. And I don't believe that, like, in the same way, we'll tie two issues together. You'll sort of tie them together, okay? The N-word, nigga and nigger, right? Like, kind of like fighting words. But I actually would argue and say, just because you heard it doesn't mean you can go start fighting somebody. In the same way, just because you see somebody burning the flag doesn't mean that you get to go and assault them. So this idea, or commit any kind of violence for that matter, okay, for either one. So burning this representation of America may incite violence and riot. Maybe it does. That's a problem of the participants. That's their problem to deal with, not ours. Okay? If I burn the flag and somebody else gets mad and they start rioting, okay, they're responsible for their actions. I didn't, okay, I burned a flag in the same way I might have dropped the N-word. Okay? Neither one gives you the right to go and destroy property or to go harm people. It's just words. So while you could argue and say it might incite violence in a riot, I would argue and say the people who are engaging in violence and riot are using it as an excuse. That's what I would say in both cases, actually. American flag burning is also used by groups of foreign nationals as a calculated act to intimidate and threaten violence against Americans because of their nationality and place of birth. You would think we were talking about the KKK hoisting up a cross in the yard owned by a black person and lighting it on fire. That would be an act of intimidation. But just burning the flag generically on the street, who exactly are you intimidating? You're not intimidating me, I can tell you that much. Okay? And I know plenty of other people that are going to be like, yeah, I hate that, you're wrong, whatever, but they're not intimidated. Okay? Now, if you come on my property and you're waving a burning flag in my face, perhaps, yeah, then I would argue and say, now you're trying to intimidate me. Okay? But you're also on my property, and so, well, things happen. But I disagree here that, that it needs to be in government documentation that says this means this. Because it's basically treating the American people like petulant little children. Like, oh, you're intimidating them. This is the same. Let me, for you right-wingers out there that seem to not understand this, I'm going to highlight this here really quickly, okay? So that hopefully you get the point. I don't know why that's here. Let's do it that way. Okay. It's an act, intimidate, and threaten violence, okay? What they're basically saying is this person's expression, this person's words absolutely have this effect on this other person. So it's no different than if we were to be like, hey, retard, talking to somebody that's acting foolish. Stop doing that, you retarded idiot. That's a retarded idea, right? You know how many right-wingers were excited that they can now use the word retard on Twitter, okay? And their argument is just because we say this word doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else feels a particular way, right? We're not necessarily demeaning people with, lower mental capacities. That's not what we're doing. We are insulting people that have, reasonable capacities and should know better. That's their argument. They're like, hey, you can't define how my words affect somebody else. Well, guess what? If you support this, you are absolutely supporting how the expression, how basically words are being used and how they affect somebody else, right? And this is one of the reasons why I have a big, huge problem with it, because I'm like, you're basically assigning to me this idea that, DL, you don't have as much agency to be a full-grown adult, look at somebody and go, oh, you're burning a flag, you're a retard, whatever, and then just walk away. No, that you're trying to define for me how I will behave, and you are trying to, in a sense, justify it. It's almost like the misinterpretation of saying riots are the language of the unheard, okay? Kind of where a lot of people will use that. I don't think Dr. King was using it to justify riots. I think he was explaining, not justifying. But I think many people today will use that phrase to justify a riot. They'll be like, well, these people aren't being heard, so they've got to do something, right? It's the same concept here. Oh, these people are rioting and committing acts of violence. They got to do something because they told them to stop burning the flag, and they wouldn't stop burning the flag. And so they just freaked out, and they started engaging in violence. No, that's not how it works. We have to be consistent. If it's wrong for you to act with violence or damage property, say a riot, over the N-word, over saying retard, right, over any other type of speech, then it's also wrong when it comes to burning the flag. And if I say the N-word and then a bunch of black folk just start, robbing stores and burning down stuff, if I shouldn't be held accountable for that, then somebody shouldn't be held accountable for burning a flag and then other people acting like buffoons, like violent criminals. Let's go on. Hopefully I've made this point. Do you see where it's going? Do you see where right-wingers are being absolutely inconsistent? Notwithstanding the Supreme Court's rulings on First Amendment protections, the court has never held that the American flag desecration conducted in a manner that is likely to incite imminent lawless action or that is an action amounting to fighting words is constitutionally protected. So basically, they're playing legalese here. They're trying to say, okay, well, the Supreme Court ruled this way, but we're finding this loophole where we can get you. That's going to come apparent here in a little bit. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. My administration will act to restore respect and sanctity to the American flag and prosecute those who incite violence or otherwise violate our laws while desecrating this symbol of our country to the fullest extent permissible under any available authority. I think we're setting up a dangerous precedent. The Attorney General, under measures to combat desecration of the American flag, the Attorney General shall prioritize the enforcement to the fullest extent possible of our nation's criminal and civil laws against acts of American flag desecration that violate applicable content-neutral laws while causing harm unrelated to expression consistent with the First Amendment. This may include, but is not limited to, violent crimes, hate crimes, illegal discrimination against American citizens, illegal. That's just a weird phrase to say altogether. Illegal discrimination against American citizens. We used to think of discrimination as being like black or women or, handicapped people or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, illegal discrimination can be literally every single citizen. This is getting out of control. I mean, look, they said woke was gone. It's right here in the executive order. Woke has not gone anywhere. The right has just adopted it for their purposes. This may include, but is not limited to, violent crimes, hate crimes, illegal discrimination against American citizens, or other violations of Americans' civil rights and crimes against property and the peace, as well as conspiracies and attempts to violate and aiding and abetting others to violate such laws. So basically, they're saying okay, if in the course of burning the flag, some right or was violated, or there was engagement of this weirdly defined discrimination, then yeah, it's a crime because the Supreme Court has not ruled against associating burning the flag with incitement or fighting words, because we're not adults. We can't hear words and see things that we dislike and then just ignore them because we're all children and we need daddy government to come in and help us. So that's the executive order, but we're gonna dig in just a little bit more because there is so much to say about this. But what I want to do is I want to hear what Trump had to say at his press conference where he was signing this. So let's play that clip here real quick.
Lastly, sir, this is an executive order on flag burning. It charges your Attorney General.
Would you listen to this? This is very important. Flag burning. All over the country, they're burning flags. All over the world, they burn the American flag. And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech. But there's another reason, which is perhaps much more important. It's called death. Because what happens when you burn a flag is the area goes crazy.
See what I mean? Like, it's not just the wording and me trying to interpret it in a certain way. The president has literally said, oh, when you burn a flag, death and destruction happen. That's what he's saying. He's associating all this stuff, and he's basically saying, you people are children. So whoever you people are. Maybe it's the immigrants today because they're, somebody burns the flag and they get all, worked up or whatever. Maybe it's, maybe it's the American citizens who get all worked up and they go berserk, whatever. Like he's calling whoever it is that is committing violent crime and property damage, death and destruction, if you will, mayhem, harm to people, whatever. He's basically saying, you're not adult enough to see the flag burn and then not worry about it.
If you have hundreds of people, they go crazy. You can do other things. You can burn this piece of paper. But when you burn the American flag, it incites riots.
There you go. He doubles down. It incites riots. This thing happens. Okay? Despite the fact, and I don't have the video, but you can go look it up. There was supposedly a 20-year veteran who, like yesterday or maybe the day before, went over to the front of the White House and burned an American flag with the bullhorn in protest and then was arrested. And if you watch the video, it's really weird because nobody's rioting. Even though the president literally signed this saying, this is what happens when a veteran went and did that in protest, nobody rioted, which is weird because I would have expected that if the president wasn't lying through his damn teeth.
At levels that we've never seen before. People go crazy. In a way, both ways. There are some that are going crazy for doing it. There are others that are angry about them doing it. Do you want to discuss that?
Sure. So what the executive order does, sir, it charges your Department of Justice with investigating instances of flag burning, and then where there's evidence of criminal activity, where prosecution wouldn't fall afoul of the First Amendment, and instructs the Department of Justice to prosecute those who are engaged in these instances of flag burning.
Okay, so basically that's really fancy language to tell you what I just told you, is that they're going to try to find some way to associate any crime that's happening within the vicinity to the person burning the flag. And if they can do that, they're going to charge them. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but they're basically confirming my reading of the executive order. So we know that Liberty Dad can read and comprehend.
And what the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement is
incite to riot.
Did anybody catch that? Just me? I hope they used the language. He didn't even read what he's literally about to sign. I hope they... I mean, we rail against our Congress for not reading bills. And this executive order is like about 2 pages. I don't know exactly, but it's about 2 pages, maybe 3. And he didn't even read it. He's not even sure that it says incite to riot in there, right? Or some variation thereof, incitement, whatever. Like, okay. Why is he signing something that he hasn't read, that he doesn't know what's in it? It's like 2 pages. He could have read it before he sat down in that nice, comfy chair.
Riot, and you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record.
Okay. He goes on to talk about more stuff, but that's the gist of it. Okay. So in today's episode, we're going to kind of cover a little bit of history, a little bit of legal critique. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read and I can critique. We're also going to, while we're talking about that legal critique, we will discuss secondary offenses, pretextual prosecution. If you're not familiar with those secondary offenses, basically, if incitement to riot is the primary offense, like, hey, we call these people rioting, then flag burning would be the secondary. Like, oh, this is on top of it, right? So the primary one would be the riot, which coincides with what they're saying in the executive order. And then pretextual prosecution, that's an argument that some lawyers will make, saying that, hey, the charge with an existing crime, like, say, violating a burning ordinance, that charge was used, but the real motivation here is just to get the flag burners, right? So it's basically saying, hey, you're using existing laws to get at somebody for something that's not a law, right? Or, not a crime. So it's not a crime to necessarily burn the flag. It's freedom of speech. You have expression, but pretextual prosecution would be like, oh, riots happened and you started it, so therefore it was because you burned the flag. That's, and really what they're trying to go after. They don't really care so much about the riot or maybe violating some other ordinance or whatnot. They're really just using that to get you for the flag burning. That's what that is. So here's some interesting tweets from our vice president, because he was no better on this issue. So let's see here. So he goes and he says, pop it up on the screen here for me so that I can read it. He said, few things. Number one, Antonin Scalia, who a lot of people have been referencing lately, was a great Supreme Court justice and a genuinely kind and decent person. Okay, whether he was a kind and decent person is not relevant. Him being a great Supreme Court justice, kind of sort of relevant. What he had to say, more importantly, why he had to say it, is actually what's important, right? So he's already kind of shifting the conversation away from where it should be. It should be, okay, Antonin Scalia agreed that legally you should be permitted to burn the flag, even though he personally opposed it, right? So he's getting away from having to address Scalia's argument or his reasoning. Number two, he said the president's executive order is consistent with Texas v. Johnson. That's something that the courts can argue more in depth on, right? They can go through and they can look at the reasoning in Texas versus Johnson. That's basically a case where a guy was burning the flag in Texas, and Texas basically punished him for it. He pushed it back. He pushed back, ended up going to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court sided with him and then said, hey, Texas, you're violating this man's freedom of speech. And I think what they're trying to do, whether it holds legally or not, is something for all the lawyers and judges to work out. But basically, where the executive order is saying, okay, if it incites a riot, if it amounts to fighting words, which has not been ruled explicitly by the Supreme Court, well then, we can go ahead and punish you for this. And so that's what he means when he says the executive order is consistent with Texas v. Johnson. And then he goes, Texas v. Johnson was wrong and William Rehnquist was right, which is a very interesting follow-up to be like, well, the executive order was consistent with this court case that was decided wrong in the first place. So that's kind of funny. But I followed that up and I said a few more things. History does not start in 1989 with Texas v. Johnson. Number two, the president's executive order does not comport with history of flag desecration, much less the vibrant free speech early on in this country. And then three, incitement will do much heavy lifting. So I think that incitement here is going to do a lot of heavy lifting if they charge anybody, right? Because basically it's going to have to really hold a lot of weight and be associated with the flag burning. So that means that's why I'm saying it's going to do heavy lifting. But we're going to dive in to a little bit more history, and I want to thank the FIRE, and I'm trying to remember what the FIRE stands for. I can't remember now, but it's a free speech organization, and they put together a document that I kind of heavily reference. It's titled Implementing a Flag Desecration Amendment to the United States Constitution. And so they go through and they discuss in great detail the history, legal issues, so on and so forth. It's a great document. It's in the show notes. I recommend that you go and read it. I know it's long, but it'll be worth your while. So let me give you some important dates that I think are valuable in understanding this whole debate in the first place. So 1776, it's the Declaration of Independence, okay? 1789, First Amendment was ratified. 1897, Illinois, Pennsylvania, South Dakota all passed flag desecration laws. However, they were aimed against commercialization, not protest. There's a big debate back in those days about using the flag for commercial purposes and political purposes, but primarily commercial purposes. 1907, Halter versus Nebraska. That's when the Supreme Court upheld the new Nebraska law banning flags on beer bottles. So this is what I mean by talking about commercialization. By 1932, though, 48 states had passed similar laws. 1968, the first federal anti-desecration law related to burning the flag in protest was passed. This was in response to the Vietnam War. So that's how the flag burning actually kind of got its big, like if you look back in history, you're going to find that's pretty much a big marker when flag burning became a thing. Okay? Then in 1989, you have Texas v. Johnson, where SCOTUS, they decide that burning the flag is indeed protected. Okay? And then 121, I want to point out, if you look at those dates, you'll see that there's 121 years between ratification of the First Amendment and the first laws against desecration, the ones dealing with commercialization. However, there are 189 years between the First Amendment's ratification and the first prohibition against burning the flag, right? So this country is over 250 years old, meaning we've went longer in this country without laws against burning the flag than we have had with them. Do you see the point there? Whenever I look back in history, one of the things I want to see is like, okay, part of being a textualist of the Constitution is saying, what did the words mean to the people that wrote it? How is it understood by the people of the day, right? I talked about this back in my episode on, what was that episode that I did? I did an episode where I was talking about the meaning of the word. I can't remember now. I had it and then I lost it. But I've done episodes in the past where I've talked about, going back and what do the words mean to the people at the time. That's how we should understand them today, right? Because you can't say, well, it would have, they would have, the founders would have agreed with it if you're using new understanding of words today. Oh, yeah, it was talking about the Alien Enemies Act. I was talking about things like, when I was talking about deportation and all that stuff. And so I was saying, like, a lot of people are going, oh, we're under invasion. And the Alien Enemy Act, that allows the president to do certain things to fend off an invasion. And you're like, well, what's the invasion? They're like, all these, immigrants are coming over here into our country. And it's like, okay, but what else are they doing? Like, are they doing anything in particular? Are they like attacking people? Are they, are they taking over states or cities? Like, what are they doing exactly here? And when you go back and you look, like in letters from, like, say, Thomas Pickering to Alexander Hamilton, he describes what an invasion actually is. So we can look and we can say it's improper to say, well, the Constitution supports this when you're using a definition that does not match at all with the words under which the Constitution or the understanding of certain amendments or what have you were written. It's just improper because you're using an entirely different meaning, so we don't know if the founders would have agreed with the modern understanding of certain words and say, oh, yeah, that too. They probably wouldn't have if you read some of their other, because they spell this out. When they talk about invasion, they're like a military force coming over and attacking people, right? They're not talking about military-aged men that come over here illegally, don't get permission, and then stay here for 20 years trying to work. That's not how they understood invasion, and we know this because that's not how they described an invasion. They described an invasion as people being physically attacked. So we have to be careful about using, historical documents to justify today when we're not, when we're playing loose with the definitions and and what was understood at the time. So this is why I like going back. This is why I think it's important that 189 years went without any prohibition of burning the flag. 189 years out of over 250. Hello, what does that tell you? So now, outside of commercialization, anti-desecration laws, they seem to correspond with wartime sentiment. So you've got like Vietnam, that was a big one. World War II was another one, right? Not exclusively, but that's where you kind of see the biggest conversation. Look at it now. And it's kind of funny now. I would not describe immigration right now, the problems that we're having, as anything close to a wartime situation. But many people on the right are. They're using words like invasion, and they're saying like, we're getting millions of military-aged men, right? We're under siege. They'll say all these crazy things, right? Okay, so they're basically describing a wartime situation. And then what? They're like, oh, you can't burn the flag. How convenient. The people on the right today are literally treating immigration and burning the flag no different than people on the left did for Vietnam. They're acting the same. So with all that in mind, let's see what some people on the right are actually saying here. So let's go back to our images here. So this comes from Cernovich. We know, we love Cernovich here. Not really. That's sarcasm. He said, quote, he's quoting, "The right to burn the American flag was made up in 1989. So, not true. We'll talk about this. Justice Brennan and Marshall, two total shitlibs who made up the law as they went along, were part of the 5-4 majority discovering this right." So he's talking about the case of Texas v. Johnson. Okay? The founders would have beat your asses for trying that shit. Be curious if there's any evidence contrary to that. As a matter of fact, the Fire, here's what they said in their document. They said, "This impassioned debate does not cleave along the liberal, conservative, or military civilian lines drawn by conventional wisdom. There is no simplistic red state, blue state divide here." So we're addressing the first portion of Cernovich's comment here, where he's like, Justice Brennan and Marshall, two total shitlibs, made up the law in this 5-4 majority. Because there's a lot of argument out there. It's like, oh, this is the liberals doing this, and then that darn Antonin Scalia, why he sided with the liberals. What a terrible guy he was at that time, right? That's the argument that's being made. And so the Fire points out that, okay, they start off by saying, hey, this debate has nothing to do with liberal, conservative, or military civilian lines. Okay, so let's continue. They go on to say, liberal Supreme Court justices, including Chief Justice Earl Warren and Justice John Paul Stevens, have written in support of flag desecration laws, while Justice Antonin Scalia, the champion of interpreting the Constitution according to the original intent of its framers, voted with the 5-4 majorities in Texas v. Johnson and United States v. Eichmann. So I want you to think about that, right? Liberal Supreme Court justices, Warren and Stevens, they supported flag desecration laws, while the more conservative, Justice Scalia, who is considered to be the more conservative justice, he actually opposed them legally. He actually opposed them personally. He's on record saying it multiple times that if he were king, what he would do is throw them all in jail because he doesn't like it. But he's like, when I read the Constitution, I do not see any prohibition on flag burning. So therefore, there is nothing unconstitutional about it. And so therefore, I cannot support this violation of somebody's constitutional rights. And we're going to talk more about rights toward the end of the show here. Okay? So then we go on. First Amendment scholar Ronald Collins has observed that, quote, the majority of justices voting to sustain constitutional challenges to a flag desecration law were nominated to the Supreme Court by Republican presidents. Wow. That's amazing. So Cernovich is wrong when he says there's this liberal-conservative divide, and it's the liberals, with one exception, Antonin Scalia, who all support burning the flag, and all the conservative justices oppose it. That's actually not true. And it's not true for the people that appointed some of these. It's unclear. They go on to say, we're not done yet. They go on to say, likewise, while the proposed amendment has the vocal support of veterans groups, and they're talking about an amendment to the Constitution that was proposed years ago to ban flag burning. While the proposed amendment has the vocal support of veterans group, many prominent veterans, including General Colin Powell and Senator John Glenn, have publicly opposed changing the Constitution to protect the flag. So no, this is when people try to tell you this is a liberal conservative thing, tell them they're historically, factually wrong. They have no idea what they're talking about. The only way they can make that argument is to cherry pick it. That is the only way. What else we got in this little stack here? All right, so the 10th Amendment Center. These guys are great. If there is one account online that I will accept correction from, it will be them, right? Like consistently. I'm not always going to agree with them, but I promise you, if I disagree with them, I'm going to really think about it first, right? They get it right very often, probably almost all the time. And I don't think anybody gets it all the time, right? I don't think that's possible, right? Here's what they said. The old revolutionaries, because now we want to, okay, so now we've addressed the judges, right? So what about history? What about that 189 years, right? Were people burning flags and it was cool? The old revolutionaries didn't burn flags. They hung politicians in effigy. Oh, and they did some tarring and feathering too. So I want you to think about this. They weren't burning flags. They were building little effigies of people they didn't like and burning, and they were like, this is so-and-so. This next one, I love Dave Benner. He's great. He said this is exactly right. He's a big history guy, right? I think he's written some books on history too, so go check him out. He said even John Jay and George Washington himself were hung in effigy after news of the Jay Treaty spread, for example, right? So he's giving you two examples where they were hung in effigy, where politicians were hung in effigy because people were mad at them. So the idea that we burn things for political, statements is as old as this country. Then the 10th Amendment Center, these guys are tweeting each other back and forth. They come back and they said, Chief Justice John Jay was literally burned in effigy over and over and over in 1795. So often that Jay supposedly said he could find his way across the country by the light of his burning effigies. Think about that for a second. Is that amazing or what? Like, in 1795, people were burning effigies of a chief justice. Imagine if somebody took an effigy of Ketanji Jackson Brown and burned it. Boy, would people howl. They would flip their lids, right? And they would be like, this is disgusting. This country doesn't represent that. We're better than. They would say all kinds. They'd call you a racist. They'd call you all kinds. Even though this literally happened in 1795, not once, not twice, but many times. And here's an old political cartoon that the 10th Amendment Center put out, if you don't believe it, right? So here's a picture. You might not be able to see it, but it says J on it, and they've got people burning the effigy. This is an old political cartoon that was made to illustrate this point, because that's what we did back in we were a fiery bunch, literally, in this country. This country has its roots in burning things and speaking loudly against that which we don't like. And it was never limited to American citizens. That is just gibberish that people make up. So Cernovich wants to say, oh, this was made up in 1989. Okay, all of their arguments against burning the flag are made up probably about within my lifetime. Every one of them. Perhaps you might go back to the 60s, when you had the Vietnam War and somebody was burning the flag then, right? And then you might actually be able to argue and say, well, some of the arguments have been reconstituted from when they were trying to ban commercialization of the flag. That's what it meant back in the day. Anti-desecration was like, whoa, you can't use the flag on your cigar box, on your beer bottle and stuff like that, right? So this idea that Cernovich is like that there's a divide, or that the founders would have beat our asses over it, is factually, historically incorrect. He is wrong. Point it out to him and anybody else repeatedly, because they need to hear it. They don't know what they're talking about, and they are ruining this great country by lying or just by their own ignorance. Take your pick. I don't care which one you choose. Now, let's go back and let's look at a couple more images here, because we've got some more stuff that we can talk about. Let's talk about some history here. All right, so let's see here. Between 1897 and 1912, and I'm quoting from the Fires document implementing a flag desecration amendment to the U.S. Constitution, they say, between 1897 and 1912, more than 30 states and territories passed laws banning flag desecration, and by 1932, almost all of the states had adopted such laws. Okay? So then they go on to say, most of the reported prosecutions in the early years, such laws were on the books, involved commercial uses of the flag. So we're not even talking about the same thing. So if anybody says like, oh, historically we had laws against desecrating the flag, we had laws that were aimed at issues with commercializing the flag. Then they go on and they say, even in this context, however, a number of state courts declared the flag desecration laws to be unconstitutional. So this goes back to this whole divide. People like Cernovich will need to go back and they will need to look at which states declared flag desecration laws unconstitutional, and they will have to determine, was that judge liberal or conservative, if they want to make this argument. But to be honest with you, he's already lost the argument, because we can look back within almost my own lifetime and see that it is not correct. We have justices within a generation or so who had different opinions and did not follow any clean-cut divide of liberal or conservative. Now, I want to point out, I did an episode a while back. I can't remember if, I think this episode was public, but if not, I will make it public. But it might have been one of the ones that I did for Rumble when I had to do premium content. I did one talking about Antonin Scalia and interpreting this, the Constitution. And he talks about how this divide of liberal conservative doesn't exist. And he gives a speech, I can't remember who he gave the speech to, but he gave a speech like in 2006 or something like that to this effect. So this whole notion is just nonsense. All right? So now, let me see. I got one more slide here. All right. So here's Matt Walsh. Now, Matt Walsh has said, this is why I have no patience for the free speech argument for burning the American flag. We don't have free speech in this country. If they're going to throw people in jail for saying a bad word, then yes, I want you thrown in jail for desecrating my flag. We aren't playing by two different sets of rules anymore. So he's quoting here this post that's unrelated in a sense. It's this post is, Shiloh Hendricks has been charged with 3 counts of disorderly conduct. You might remember she was the white woman who was on video using the N-word. Apparently, some little I don't know if it was an actual black person or if it was some other some like an immigrant, a brown person of some sorts. But there was a child. And there's all kind of arguments about whether the child was disabled or what. But apparently some child, like 5 years old or so, grabbed in her bag and was trying to steal stuff, and she dropped the N-word on him. Now, the video that we have available to us, it actually doesn't show, it doesn't show that, where's my image here? Oh, I know what's going on. I was looking for something, sorry, while I was trying to talk here at the same time. So apologies. So, what the video does not show is her talking to the child. It's her talking to the man recording her, goading her, and telling her, say it again. And then she finally does say it again, and then all hell breaks loose from there. So that's what's going on. That's what he's referencing. And so he's saying, like, look, and a lot of people have made this argument. They're like, look, this woman has said the N-word, and she's being charged. And so, therefore, we have a double standard, like if we're talking about free speech. And I don't disagree. We do have a double standard. However, the problem is The answer is not to, if you can't beat them, join them. That's not the answer. The answer is to say, no, she should not be legally charged for saying unpleasant words, right? If she was intimidating a child or assaulted a child or some other actual crime like threatening, then yes, perhaps we can go with that. But just saying mean words, no, she shouldn't be. And so what the right should be doing, especially now that they have President Trump and they have a Republican Congress, I mean, hello, what are you guys doing? You're squandering, what you fought so hard for to get your guy elected, to maintain control, and then you're just going to give it all up and go, well, she got busted and she got sent to jail, so you know what? We'll just send you to jail for burning the flag. We're okay with it. You're giving up. The hell? Kind of American are you to give up? I don't want to say our forefathers, but those that came before us, they burned effigies. They dropped tea into the harbor. They did all kind of things. They were a rowdy bunch. And then now the right's like, I guess we'll just give up because we're Americans. That's what we do. Now, I'm going to address more about this Shiloh Hendricks tomorrow. I got some good stuff for you tomorrow. You're going to want to tune in for that. And that's kind of partly why I dropped the N-word earlier and made the analogy. Because at the end of the day, whether it's the N-word or burning the flag, no, it's free speech. And we have a long history of free speech in this country. And we need to make sure that we absolutely do not lose it. And right now, we are losing it because people they're basically giving it away. They're giving it up. Now, I got a cartoon here I want to show you, and it's a little provocative, but that's okay. That's what we do here. Because I want to address another issue that's kind of similar to what we've going on here. Oh, before I do that, let me address one more thing. He says, I want you thrown in jail for desecrating my flag. Okay, full stop, where we got our tire streets. It is, if it's your flag that you own, then yes, I can be legally punished for it. But if it's my flag that I legally own, then no, Matt, it is not your flag. You do not own all of the flags. American citizens do not own all of the flags. We do not own the representation of liberty. We own the exact flag that we might hold in our hand that we purchased or were given or perhaps made, right? That if it's our property, yes, we own it. And somebody else destroying it, yes, they should be punished. Some way. I don't know. Fine, throw them in jail, whatever. We can work that out later. But no, I'm not doing this desecrating my flag. Whatever flags are in this house are not owned by Matt. I'll do with them as I damn well please. And he has no business as an American talking about liberty and then saying you should go to jail if you destroy your own property. Now, speaking of property, let me pull up another image because this is something that's getting a lot of attention. Okay? So a lot of people are making this connection. They're saying, oh, you can't burn the flag, you get in trouble. But if you burn the pride flag or a trans flag, that's considered hate speech, right? Now, one of the arguments in response to this is that, hey, nobody has ever been thrown in jail for simply burning their own pride flag. That is true. But I think people that are responding to this are missing a major point. And it goes toward this whole hate speech. It also goes toward what I was calling pretextual prosecution, and you can call them enhancement, like hate crime enhancement laws, so on and so forth. There's any number of different names, but these are basically where you've got add-ons. Think of it as you have a crime, and then like insurance, you have riders. Okay. And then we have all these riders, if you will, that we add, that we tack on. So if I steal somebody's pride flag from their house and then I burn it, I'm going to get in trouble, rightfully so, for stealing their pride flag and for destroying their property. But then I'm going to get an enhanced criminal penalty because they're going to say, well, that was a hate crime because you did that out of malice. And so then let's just say that I got 5 years in jail for stealing their property, for burning their flag, and let's say all the while I was yelling, you're next, so now I've made threats to them, right? Which would be a credible threat since I've stolen your property and I'm burning your flag, right? That would kind of make it a bit of a credible threat because I've already shown my willingness to violate your property. And so, they are correct in that it's never happened. But then you have these enhancement laws, hate speech laws, which conservatives were supposed to be against. Okay? We're supposed to be pushing back and saying no. Okay? Just because somebody doesn't like LGBTQ plus IA 2.0 people, just because they don't like them is not relevant. What's relevant are your actions and any threats that you might make that are credible. Okay? Credible is an important key word there. Okay? Why is all of this important? Okay. The same people that are saying nobody has ever been put in jail for simply burning a pride flag, they're also the same people that are objecting to this executive order. Many of them. Maybe not all of them, but many of them. They're objecting to it. Why are they objecting to it? They're saying, hey, this is freedom of speech. You can't punish people for freedom of speech. What does the executive order say that I just walked you through, that the president himself just said? If they can associate the burning of the flag with some other crime, you will be punished for burning the flag. It is basically, effectively, the equivalent to enhancement hate crime laws. So yes, in a sense, they are the same. The executive order is not that different. I mean, it might be different legally if you break it down in the construction of it and you say, okay, what does legally this classify as? What does this classify? What is the terminology that we would use? Okay, so the lawyers out there, don't skewer me. I recognize that they may be different in terms of structure and how they're understood in law, but ultimately how they play out are the same. In that if I burn a flag and that something else is associated with it, I will get in trouble for burning the flag and for that associated something else, right? Same thing with the pride flag. If I burn the pride flag and it's just mine and I'm protesting, okay, no big deal, nobody cares. But if I burn the pride flag and I go, all you gays are next, right? If that's what I do, well, now all of a sudden I'm making a threat. And if I stole that pride flag from somebody else, well, now I violated somebody's private property rights, okay? And so guess what? Now they're going to be like, well, DL, you've committed a hate crime. It's basically the same thing as it plays out, maybe not, in the legal context, strictly speaking. It is the same. It plays out the same way as the executive order. And so again, people on the right, they are capitulating and they're giving in to the hate speech by simply finding their own version of it. That's all they're doing. These two images would be great in that meme that says corporate wants you to identify the difference. And somebody says they're the same picture. They basically are. You have the right and you have the left. The only distinction here to make is that this picture probably reverses them. Free speech and the American flag should literally be on the right side, whereas the hate speech and the pride flag should be on the left side. Then it would be a 100% perfect depiction of what is happening today. That's the issue that we have, folks. Now, before I get to the comments, I want to play one more thing. This comes from the 10th Amendment Center. This is a great little clip. I absolutely love it. I recommend that you go to their YouTube and you just start watching videos because they will educate you on properly understanding the Constitution. Okay? Because look, here's what I've said in the past. If you're a libertarian and you don't like the Constitution because you believe it's not strict enough for government, that's great. But right now we have a problem. And that problem is that people don't even adhere to the Constitution as is. We don't even have constitutionalist country anymore. It's not really a phrase, but I'm kind of making it one. Like, we largely have something else. Definitely a bastardization of it. Okay? And we can see, as I just illustrated, that the right and the left are as guilty in their own ways. So when it comes to your rights, it's very important to not think of them as something that government has given you. Okay? So I want to play this clip from the 10th Amendment Center because I think they nail it. This is Michael Bolton. I think he does many or most of their videos, maybe even all of them. I'm not sure. But he's absolutely great. I love this clip. You can find the full show in the show link, in the show notes. Go watch it.
Way too many people today, and that's really an understatement too, way too many people today refer to their rights by amendment number. Like my First Amendment free speech rights. It's not liberty if it comes with a government permission slip. Rights are not gifts from government. They don't come from documents like a constitution or a Bill of Rights. You have rights because you exist. Now, of course, governments, they're not big fans of this view, and they do everything in their power to reject it or suppress it.
He's absolutely correct. As we can see in this executive order, they are doing everything in their power to suppress your right, your inherent right to free speech, to say what you want to say. And people on the right and people on the left are playing into this repeatedly, over and over. It needs to stop. Now, to his point about looking at them as amendments, I kind of think of it as similar to my criticism of Christians who will cite a Bible verse. They'll say, like, John chapter 3:16, and they'll cite it, right? And I'm not dogging on my religious friends. What I'm saying is that we have to be careful when we cite documentation. When we cite documents, how about that? When we recite documents or when we quote them, we have to be careful not to present them as if this thing comes in a vacuum. It's part of a broader idea. So John 3:16 is part of a broader idea in Christianity, right? It just kind of summarizes an idea neatly and concisely. The 3 and the 16 help you locate it and help you remember it, where it is. The same thing applies to our amendments and the Constitution. The Constitution does not give you rights. It does not tell the government these are the rights that this person has. It is a limitation on the government because we have a government. We have a government, ergo, the government has to have rules of operation. That's what it's for. But when we look at it, it's not my First Amendment right. It's not my Second Amendment right. Like, those are just nifty ways to reference it. Those are ways that we've documented it, that we've formalized it in a constitution so that we can all reference it when needed and say, no, you have violated my rights. Here is the document you were supposed to be following, but you didn't. That's how it should be understood. I have the right as a person to self-ownership. That is a fundamental principle that I have, period. It's inherent. Because I own myself, I can do things like defend myself. I can talk. I can say things that I want to say. I can say this government is terrible. I can say this government is good. It's really hard. I'm going to try it again. Hold on. I can say this government is good. Is good. Well, I tried. But I can say whatever I want. That is because not because I have a First Amendment right. That's just the formal declaration of it in writing, ensuring that the government cannot violate it. And perhaps in some cases, maybe gives, like a justice or a judge some way to judge and say, well, DL has the right to say this, and the government punished him for saying it, so therefore the government was wrong. To be an arbiter. That is it. But I don't have that right because it's there. I have that right, like Michael Bolton said, because I exist. Okay? So keep that in mind as you're going about. So hopefully in this episode, hopefully we've dismantled this whole idea that there's any historical support whatsoever for punishing people for flag burning. It's not there. It doesn't exist. Hopefully you've been convinced that there's no liberal conservative divide. And so now we have to go back to doing things the way we should be doing them in the first place, which is saying, oh, Antonin Scalia sided with people that generally have differing views. Why? What was his reasoning? Why? Let's address that. Hopefully you understand where your rights really come from. They come from nature or from God, if you believe in a God of some sort. That's where they come from. They do not come from government. Hopefully you understand, as we only touched upon it lightly, that the Constitution is just simply a written document that formalizes everything so that we can all reference it. But that is not the source of our rights. And then hopefully you recognize that right now, the right and the left, they are both playing loose and fast with rights, our rights. They're just playing with them as it suits them. Time to push back, folks. All right, let's get to some comments here. Let's see what you guys are saying. Maybe you guys need to correct me on a few things. Who knows? Let's see what we got here. That Liberty Lady says, I'm curious how the libertarians who voted for Trump are thinking right now. Well, a lot of them, again, like I said at the top of the show here, is they're trying to play this. That's not what I voted for. Sorry, too bad. That is what you voted for. Donald Trump said not once, but at least twice to an audience, a packed audience, that he was going to try to ban flag burning and impose a punishment of 1 year in jail, to cheers of the audience, right? And you said at the time, he has a new crew about him. Things are different. He's going to be making headway with the things that he says he wants to do. Well, then you should have believed him. Sorry you didn't. Let's see, what else we got in here? Yes, Oddsman says, free Dexter Taylor because we've had enough media ignore Democrat Party racism. I agree. Go look up Dexter Taylor. I'm not going to get into it right now because we're at the end of the show, but it is a very sad case. Very quickly, just kind of briefly, he is in jail, or I think he's been sentenced already for the quote-unquote crime of making guns in his home. That's it. He didn't shoot anybody. He didn't threaten anybody. He didn't even sell them, okay, if you want to make that argument. He did nothing other than just make them and then say, hey, guys, if you want to make them, here are the plans. Here, you can do it too. And what do we know about our rights? You have them inherently. And if you have the right to defend yourself, then surely you have the right to create or develop whatever tool that you feel is best to defend yourself. Let's see. What else? What do we got here? That Liberty Lady points out, gun control is racist. Yes, all of it is. Let's see. Joe says these people just skip over the 9th Amendment. Sadly, they skip over a lot of amendments when it suits them. Maybe I'll have to do a show on that. But honestly, if you want to know about the 9th Amendment, hop on over. I really can't promote them enough. Hop on over to the 10th Amendment Center. They do way better at laying out the proper understanding of all the amendments, the Constitution. So go check them out. They're absolutely wonderful, and there's really no reason for me to redo their wonderful work. Let's see. Where did I go? Joe says, I am objectively correct all the time. Brother, I know the feeling. Let's see, what else here? Yes, it's not really even if you can't beat them, they'll beat you. Or I'm sorry, if it's I said earlier, if you can't beat them, then join them. That's kind of how they're playing. But it might be more accurately presented as, if you can't beat them, then they'll beat you. And that's what's happening. Because if the left has done something and the right was squawking about it, and now the right is doing the same thing, guess who won? Keith points out, are we really that delicate? The flag symbolizes freedom and liberty. It symbolizes the protection of my right to burn it. Absolutely. And we should be grown-ups. Big kids. I'll be teaching my son. Y'all know he's Asian. I'm going to teach him, like, if somebody makes fun of him and be like, you squinty-eyed, flat-faced fool, whatever, right? Laugh. Laugh in their face. Make a joke. Whatever. Don't be delicate. And if we can raise our children to not be delicate against bullies in school, then by golly, we should be raising our kids to not be delicate, but for bullies that we don't even know about the American flag. It's just absurd. Let's see what else we got in here. Joe says we don't have a constitutional government. Question mark? You should go to jail for saying that. Well, my time's probably coming. If things are going the way they're going and they don't change, my time is coming. Let's see. Let's see what else we got here. Yes. My VA lady asked, Liberty Dad, you did mention one more time about your schedule the week of Labor Day and what's going on. So again, next week I will not be live streaming, but I will put out episodes. I've got some premium content that I'm going to put out publicly, and I'm not promising anything, but I may make a video or two on the side. I'm doing that because I'm taking some time off work for Labor Day, and then I'm going to kind of combine all of it together to get caught up and make some changes to the show so that when I come back, it'll be better than ever. We'll be ready to rock and roll and show this world what's up. So that's what I got going on. So still tune in 7:30, but don't rush if you want to get in on the comments because you won't have to worry about it. Let's see. Trump was criminalizing flag burning in his first term. They voted for this. I don't know about criminalizing it in his first term. I can't remember, but you're absolutely correct. They did vote for it because he told us he was going to do it, if nothing else. Let's see here. I think that is it. DL protesting Labor Day by taking a week off and working, just to make that point clear. Yes, I have taken a week off, but I am actually just going to be working. Just not like work. Only work, not work. All right, folks, that's my show for today. I will see you guys tomorrow. We're going to have another fun episode. Until then.